can you share a bit about your journey to sobriety? You said that you've been sober 9 months now.
Yeah, correct.
I just want to know, like, just share a little bit about it and then what inspired you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very long story, but I will keep it condensed. So I'm 50 years old. I'm a European. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. Um, and technically my career I've been in education for the majority of the time. So as a computer science and mathematics teacher, I studied computer science at university. I also did some stints in software companies. I was a company trainer, Microsoft trainer. So I did a variety of things. Um, and in 2017, I moved to China to work there.
China.
Yes, I worked in China for 5 years. Yeah, I always wanted to work
Wow.
abroad, and it's not that it was needed, but I just liked the adventure. I already traveled the globe when I was younger. That never stopped, and eventually I took it a step further when I got offered a job as a math teacher in a major city in China. And I
Oh.
never regretted it. I'm still abroad 8 years later. It's 2024 now, and now I'm married in Malaysia. So yeah, three countries and a very diverse career, but always as an educator and trainer. So technically, if we go all the way back in my past, I was a beer drinker. So to say that up front, I only drank beer, and people might think like, oh, that's just beer, that's light alcohol, but that can be very problematic too, especially in certain
Yeah.
quantities.
Yeah.
Technically, I had my first beer at age 19, and that was part of like how everybody starts as a social group of friends, doing sports together, going to the canteen afterwards, having a few drinks, relaxing, etc., etc. But throughout my life, especially in my 20s and in my 30s, that was a habit that stuck, and that habit was never really a big problem at that time. But in hindsight, I found out that I became dependent on drinking beer, particularly to deal with negative emotions, and that was
Okay.
a big breakthrough. And I will go a bit more in depth later on about this during this interview. But eventually, that led me to insights last February that technically make me, that's the only word I have for it, snap out of it and just quit drinking cold turkey.
Mentally dependent on it and physically or just mentally?
Yeah, not fit. That is the interesting part. I was never physically dependent on it. I also was able to stop for months in a row, or even half a year, or sometimes I didn't even think about drinking. But it was so ingrained in my social environment and the people that I used to hang out with that it
Yeah.
was just normal. You go visit somebody, a family member, you're probably familiar with it, or you go socializing, and 9 out of 10 times that means drinking.
Yeah.
And I never really gave it much thought. I never really analyzed where that came from, and I got clarity on that at the beginning of this year, and that was a major breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah. So 9 months ago, what month? Well, are you in the same, you're in the same month. Are you in the same season as the United States? Because you're in Malaysia. So what's
Yeah,
the
well,
season
there are
there?
no seasons. We don't have 4 seasons here. This is the tropics, so it's
Really?
always like, yeah, we get the wet and the dry season here, and it's always hot. So
Really?
I think in Fahrenheit, like 90s. Yeah. So
Oh, that's
I
my type of
continuously run the
weather.
aircon. Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I moved out here and stayed around. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
I will get into you mentioned working through trauma as a key part of
yeah.
understanding your relationship with alcohol. So, can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit more about how addressing that trauma helped
Yeah.
you on your path to sobriety?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the thing is, when I started drinking, I just saw it like most people, just as a social activity, and I never thought that was problematic. Uh, Once I moved to China, and that was actually a turning point in 2017. Whilst in China, I found myself gathering along people that I back then called friends, but they were technically alcoholics. They were drinking buddies, but drinking buddies are not friends.
Yeah.
And At that time, I also actually got involved with an American lady who was a bit older than me. That was also an expat. She worked for the university there, and she made me see that the relationship that I had with alcohol back then was problematic in that way that I always chose to be with these drinking buddies instead of her, at least for quite a few times. And I never gave it much thought, but in hindsight, I found out that is actually, she was just right, technically. I just fooled myself. And that became obviously when 2 years later, one of these drinking buddies, yeah, he passed away from probably alcohol-related illness. He was 71, but that came as a shock to me. I was like, oh, these people
Yeah.
don't live forever, and that makes you reflect on your own alcohol usage. And from that moment on, I already started to see like maybe I should pay more attention to this. And that is actually really when I started the journey to dive deeper in the reasons why I drank. And I found out a lot about myself along the way, and that's also how I eventually ended up with trauma work and even, yeah, technically mirroring with a therapist. Yeah.
So trauma work to
So
you. Can you explain what trauma work is? Is that, I mean, are you just talking about
yeah,
therapy, or is there a certain type of therapy that you did to help? Because there's so many different
yeah,
therapies out there.
yeah, absolutely. So exactly. And I mean, I'm by no means like a mental health expert or whatever. I'm just a struggling human, just like everybody. So, but what I eventually found out, and like I guess a lot of people start that way, is you start reading things. You know, I read books, I went online, I listened to podcasts. I started to figure out like, is there anything I can relate to? And I start to see a pattern. I start to find people that feel the same way as I do. And in my case, that identified as suppressing my emotions. So technically, not allowing myself to feel sad or allowing to feel grief. My father passed in 2019, and yeah, I just continued as usual, business as usual, and that was never a healthy coping strategy because we all know that, that alcohol is a suppressant. We don't want to feel, but I flipped that script around. I wanted to feel, and then I also started to technically seek feedback, mirroring with a therapist. And it was not a specific person, but for me, the real insight was when I was talking to the therapist, and I was just on BetterHelp, which is just an online website. You can talk to people, licensed people. Let me be clear about that. And then I was confronted with something that changed my insight forever. And once I dove deeper, and that was the therapy called inner child work. That was
Inner
something
child
that
work.
inner child work, yeah. And inner child work is technically something that comes from also Carl Jung, shadow work. Sometimes it's called like that, and technically it comes down to that you confront yourself with your childhood upbringing and emotions. And the idea is that you figure out why certain responses as an adult yeah, are actually there, or certain beliefs that you have as an adult. Where what is the root cause of that? And in inner child work, technically, people challenge you to go back to your roots, literally, and to see what influence your parents had in your upbringing. And it has nothing to do with blaming or shaming your parents. It's just
Yeah.
identifying to see where there was a lack of technically anything. And in my case, that came down to I was raised in a family where we didn't speak about emotions. It was like a family where people said, "Man up, keep
Yeah.
going. Why are you crying?" And of course, as a man, yeah, as a boy at least back then, that's what that was the norm. That was what was normal. But
That's how I grew
way
up
later
too.
on in my life, yeah, and people say, okay, what is your problem? I mean, what is the issue? And for me, this was the start of the breakthrough to see that because I always suppressed my emotions based on how I was raised. And again, this is not to blame my parents.
Hmm.
My parents are really, really good people. My father passed in 2019, but both of my parents were also not able to convey their emotions. So they technically just did what they learned from their parents, my grandparents.
Yeah.
So what that
Yeah.
meant is during my adult life, I had to find that out. I had to I had to dive deep. And one of the things that I found out is that I'm a people pleaser. I'm an oversharer. I'm somebody that puts other people first. I was When I was 15 years old, some family members called me the social worker of the family, and I was like, that's not my job. I was like, oh, as a boy, you're not supposed to take care of other people's problems. I was always the one that gives advice to
Yeah.
other people, the helper, whatever you call it. Yeah, and I've kept that role throughout my adult life. I was always there for friends and always, oh, you're so easy to talk to, Ferry, and oh, you're so understanding. And but who was turning towards me? Yeah, nobody.
Right.
and and that
Exactly.
and that and that was exactly the turnaround point for me. Like, hold on, before you start to help other people, maybe we should look at your own emotions first and see what is going on there. Yeah, and then a lot of it surfaced, and that eventually led to my yeah m- for me being able to flip the switch, to stop
Yeah.
drinking. And then also the added confusion, I mean, the thing is that because you suppress your emotions, you just don't know what you feel. When I was younger, I didn't know what anger
Hmm.
was, or frustration, or sadness. It's just like, oh, I feel this. I felt it, but I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know the root cause, and I was confused my entire adult
Well, and
life
then
about
you
my emotions. Like, why
probably
am I sad? Why am I?
probably didn't know how to cope with them either, because anger, you're not supposed to be angry. You're not supposed to be sad. You're only supposed to be
Exactly.
joyful and happy. So if
Exactly.
you're angry and sad, you nobody shows you how to deal with it
Yeah,
besides getting in
and if you
trouble as
have
a
the,
child.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, in my case, my parents were not the kind of people that punished, but I would say they just didn't know how to respond. I mean, emotional neglect is maybe a big word, but they just weren't capable of dealing with me and also my brother's emotions. There was nobody to talk to, other than just man up, or like, oh, don't feel something like that. That is the message I got. But of course,
Yeah,
that's
don't
impossible,
feel.
And
Oh,
and then and after that insight, I was able to connect the dots. It was like I could see my parents for who they were, and particularly my father. My father was a silent drinker, so he never talked. He was always a man that was just opening his beer after work and flip on the TV and watch some dumb show, and that's it. That's how I saw my father. And again, let me be very clear about this. My father was a great provider. He was absolutely a good human being, but he had a lot of unfulfilled dreams in his life himself, and he projected that on me and my brother.
hmm.
So I lived through him, and that expectation is something I've struggled with my whole life. And my drinking was related to his drinking. I always wanted to get his approval by drinking. I thought, okay, my father will understand me by me mimicking him. And once I
That
understood
is
that I am
nuts.
actually, yeah, that's a profound insight. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that is,
That I mean, I'm taking
yeah,
notes and I'm like,
that is,
holy crap, that's deep.
yeah, yeah, that is very deep. Yeah, and I had two main insights that stopped me to drink, and this was the number one: my relationship with my father. I was able to let go of him emotionally. That was so he passed, like I said, 5 years ago, and at the beginning of this year, I was actually able to say, "Okay, Dad, you rest, and I can live on without that burden of me feeling that I have to." Not only please you, but technically just to be able to live up to his expectations, because they were sky high. He was just a factory worker, and I was the first guy in my family to graduate from university. My brother has a university degree. We're the only two people. So yeah,
was the first in my family to go to a
Oh,
university.
really? Yeah,
My dad's a very smart man. He worked as a mechanic and truck
yeah,
driver. And so
yeah.
it's funny, like, because I feel like they're very similar
Very
stories,
similar.
just slightly
My
different because I'm a female.
my
So I
father was
was a little bit,
was a car mechanic, 40 years in the same factory. Yeah, a very
oh,
smart
wow.
man as
So,
well.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And they could have done so much with their life. And, yeah. And
yeah.
then we're the first ones to go to a university out of our
Exactly. Yeah.
families. And I mean, it's just not that I
Yeah.
graduated from the university,
Maybe that's
but
also why I resonated with your content, because I will be honest. I mean, once I got sober, I was looking for channels like everybody does, and I stumbled upon your channel, and I just kept watching, and it was just like kind of homecoming. Oh yeah, 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 felt that, did that. Okay, yeah, and then you figure out that a lot of people out there with the same kind of experience. Our stories are not unique, but the
yeah,
stories need to be bespoken out. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so that was the first main insight, and the second one, and that was actually the one that flipped me over to the right side, is that I had so because I was a people pleaser. One of my friends that um, he was 10 years older than me, but he was a raging alcoholic. And I can just say that. But he was really a good friend of mine. But the only thing we did together was drinking, 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 drinking. And what happened was that I told him that I wanted to, yeah, not to quit drinking at that point in time, but I wanted to just look at my alcohol usage. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep on drinking." So then I started to realize, like, yeah, but the sad part of this story is, and I won't go in too much detail, is that he eventually passed away in February from alcohol-induced cancer,
Alcohol
kidney
induced
cancer.
cancer.
Yeah, kidney cancer.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And once that happened, and I couldn't attend his funeral because his funeral was back in the Netherlands and I was in Malaysia, so that didn't work last minute. That's the other side of the world. I on the I was never forget the date. It was February 28th, 2024. I had a few beers and a few more beers, trying to comprehend what went down. I woke up the next day. I was like feeling like crap, of course, and then I just snapped out of it. It's like, this is it. Goodbye.
wow.
Called my mom and said I
Um,
quit.
what, uh, so what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the initial stages of quitting drinking, and then how did you overcome those?
Yeah, so a few, of course, I had multiple other attempts to at least to, and we know that is a lie for people like us. I'm just going to be honest. Moderate moderate
Yeah.
didn't work for me. I just found that out. That worked for my friends. It didn't work for me. So that's why I quit. I just no longer lie to myself. I had multiple attempts when I was living in China, and to be able to go without alcohol for months. So that means I didn't have a physical dependency, but I had
Mm.
definitely a mental dependency. So what happened is when I was sad, or there was something going on emotionally, or I felt angry, drink. Yeah. So then I knew something was wrong. And that meant also that I had to fix, no, not fix, that's not the wrong word. I have to had to process my emotions. I had to figure out where that came from. And that, yeah, led me down a path of, yeah, seeking help and going into therapy, talking to people. And that was technically the biggest challenge at first. So in order for it to, once I noticed that, okay, this has to do with your emotions and the way you, and the emotional immaturity that led to the coping mechanism of drinking beer. I knew this was way deeper than I thought it would be, because I always told myself, oh, a few beers is fine, you know. And sometimes it was.
Yeah.
That is the weird thing. Sometimes it was. If I felt good, it was okay. But when I felt bad or there was something going on or stress,
Urges or cravings when you first started, when
um,
you your journey.
that is the weird thing about my whole journey is that after that sober date, which is for me is February 29, 2024, I had zero urges and zero cravings because I didn't associate alcohol with fun anymore.
Oh,
I
yeah.
started to exercise, dieting, losing weight. always look at your running videos these days. I do the same. A bike here. I'm learning new skills. I transferred out of teaching. I'm now doing freelance work. I'm starting a huge the creativity boost. I could never do that when
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I feel healthier. I feel lighter, and of course, I have days that it's not always sunshine and whatever. But I don't revert to drinking. I just take a big, I don't know, jar of water and just go exercising. Okay, then I just stop my taking exercise. I have my home gym back here, and that's now my antidote. That's how I deal with emotions. And I journal. It's okay. You
Yeah.
feel like you feel bad, and why is that? Nah, just try to figure it out. But my
Yeah.
old self
So
was just
are you
no.
still doing therapy?
No, not formally anymore. No, I've kept that up for a few
Okay.
months. I was also a member of two accountability groups online, and that eventually led to me keeping in touch with some individuals. Uh, but yeah, as of now, no longer therapy. What I would still do, however, and that is something I want to mention. It sounds like insignificant, but it is actually a big thing. I had some support from some Reddit groups. One is called Stop Drinking on Reddit, and they have like a daily check-in, and I still do that. I just
So
go
you said
online in the
Reddit
morning
group
and
check-in?
Yeah, Reddit, a subreddit called R Stop Drinking, and that is a community of people that yeah, bond in sobriety, and they do daily check-ins. It's like I will not drink today. They just write that, and it sounds like a minor thing, but it helps you to yeah to just be aware every day. Every day, just
Yeah.
30 seconds. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I feel like that's
And
why a
once
lot
you
of people like my posts, my daily posts, because a lot
yeah,
of you guys engage with my daily posts, and
exactly.
um, that it encourages me to keep going.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that is why channels like yours are very important. It's just that it's not the risk of that you fall back into drinking again. Of course, that can happen, but it's also to just that we remind ourselves to stay strong. That we need to stay
Yeah,
vigilant to not
exactly.
fall back into old habits because that happens to yeah,
Yeah.
to plenty of people, right?
Here's a good question. Living as an expat in Malaysia, how has being in a different country influenced your sobriety journey? Have cultural differences impacted your experience?
Um, yes and no. So let's go back a little bit to I was an expert in China first, and when I moved to China, you need to understand a little bit of the context. If you move abroad as a Western expat and you go to Asia, you end up in something called the expat bubble. And the expat bubble is technically you're mostly with white people, Western people in a foreign country. So what that means is that you technically your whole social life still revolves around hanging out with mostly Westerners. So I work for an American school, so most of my colleagues were American, and we would just hang out after school, having a drink, going to a bar, going to a restaurant together. So in that regard, yeah, the country as itself, for the cultural differences, didn't really change my social environment. So short answer, no. In Malaysia now it's different. Malaysia is predominantly a Muslim country, and as you know, Muslims don't drink. So there are way less bars, and especially in the countryside. I moved out of the city now. Yeah, there
Oh,
are no bars. Not that I'm interested, but
oh,
yeah, it helps with the environment. You're not tempted or triggered. Not that I would be with, I will be honest, but yeah, it helps that the availability is of course also less.
are there any lifestyle changes or new routines that you've adopted that support your sobriety?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I will be honest. I turned my life around completely. First of all, of course, like everybody, fitness. I when I was younger, I technically didn't do any physical activity. That had to do with the fact that uh, when I spent all my time doing playing a mind sport. It's called checkers. My father was a
Oh,
strong checkers player, so my brother and I also did that. But the problem with checkers is that you just sit on your butt all day.
yeah.
There's no. It's 5 to 6 hours sitting at a desk. That is what the sport is. It is a serious sport. It's really good for your
Yeah.
analytical
Hold.
skills. But yeah, that prevented me from exercising. I will be honest, and that I kept that up until my 30s. Yeah. So the first time that I started to get serious about exercising was in China. I got a personal trainer and I learned boxing. And
Fun.
from that moment on, yeah, I loved it. I did just the weight training and some cardio just inside a gym. And since I moved to Malaysia, I added swimming, biking. I have my home gym with weights. Nothing spectacular, but just doing my exercise on a daily basis. And I feel good. I'm losing weight. And so that would be a major change. And another one is just healthy cooking. Yeah, the boring ones, I know, but the very important
They
ones.
work.
More salad.
They.
Yeah, more salad, more salmon, more less greasy stuff. No fast food, that kind of stuff. And living in Malaysia makes it easier because you can do order in every day. It's like for $2 they bring it to your home, full meal because it's dirt cheap here. Yeah, it's nothing. I can eat
The
I can eat
United
out every
States needs
day
to get
for
on
one,
board.
two, $3. Yeah, I know.
Oh wow.
For the American viewers, I know it's insane. It's the same in my home country, of course. In Europe, it's the same. But
Oh
here in
man,
Southeast Asia,
it's
it's just a feast, and everything is fresh and fresh fruits and pineapple and whatever, and it costs almost nothing. But
yeah,
yeah, you still need to make healthy choices, and I try to do that. I still fail sometimes, but I forgive myself, and then just it's all about consistency. Just consistency.
yeah,
Exercise every day, trying to eat well every day, sleep enough, drink enough water, no snacking, no more late evening bags of chips like I used to do.
yeah. I I feel like a lot
Yeah,
of us that have
and
quit
yeah, I mean,
drinking realize the water.
yeah, the water is a huge thing. Now, the thing with the water is that is actually the good thing about living in a tropical country. You have to drink water because you dehydrate. It's always hot here.
Uh, how was living in the hot country while drinking? I mean, it had to like just take a lot out of you.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, you dehydrate really fast because alcohol dehydrates you. So that's the opposite of
Yeah.
what you should do in a hot country.
Yeah.
Of course, you can compensate with also drinking a lot of water. Yeah, actually, it's just probably the worst environment to drink because alcohol doesn't help you. Like I said, that friend that I
No.
mentioned before and that now unfortunately passed, he and I spent 2 weeks on Bali in Indonesia, and he dehydrated himself. No, that was in Thailand actually. In Thailand, when I was there with him, I had to take him to the hospital because he was dehydrated. He
Oh
had a few
wow.
beers. He was sitting and didn't feel well. Yeah, I had to take him to the local hospital in southern Thailand. And eventually, the doctor said, "Yeah, he's dehydrated. Drink water." So, what have you guys been drinking? A beer. He was like, "You shouldn't do that."
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, all these things, yeah, contribute to like, okay, what am I doing? They're like a kind of like awareness that eventually, just when you connect the dots, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
And
so
water.
technically, kidney cancer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he had a heart attack as well a few years prior, and then so he had pills from his cardiologist, and then yeah, he had I won't go too deep in the details, but yeah, then he had cancer that spread out in multiple organs, and then he just gave up, and his response was, "I'm gonna drink more." Like, okay, man, do whatever you need to do. But to give you a little bit of perspective, if we rewind the clock before his passing 6 or 7 years, I visited him in a Dutch rehab, and he said, "I want to quit," and he made multiple attempts, but he was never able to overcome his addiction, and his addiction was also fed by sadness and disappointment in life. And when I mirrored that to my own feelings, I was like, that's not me. I'm not going to go down that same route. just snapped out of it like that. That's very strange. Never had that in my life, but it's just like, okay, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Boom. It's like a snake, yeah, technically losing his outer skin or something. It's like,
Yeah. And I wish it could be that way for a lot more people, but unfortunately, like me and you and some other people I talk to, it works like that. But for majority,
yeah,
it does not work like that.
no, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and it's really, and also what I sometimes read also on the Reddit that I mentioned, it's like how people then are being judged by family and you're no longer drinking. And you also talk about it in your videos sometimes that people are like, okay, now you're no longer one of us, that kind of crap.
Yeah.
It's yeah. How to overcome? I mean, I will be extremely honest with you. I'll give you another example of something that as a people as technically a formal people pleaser, I try to make everybody happy, including my acquaintances and friends. So if people were hard drinkers, I would just technically, now you support them. That doesn't make any sense now, of course, but I would just go along with them and take their BS. But that changed rigorously. So I said goodbye to most of my friends were understanding. And I'll be very clear. All my best friends said, okay, hey, good for you, awesome. And these friends I knew for 25, 30 years. Huh? I'm 50 now. The one guy I knew from high school, so I'm going back. And but some of the people, for example, that were my former drinking buddies in China, yeah, came on my Facebook saying like, "Quitters are losers," and I blocked him right away.
Oh my gosh,
I
I've
was
heard
like,
that
"Wow,
so many times since I
okay,
quit.
yeah,
Ugh, maybe it's the other way around.
yeah." Yeah, I was like, did he really
Oh
write
man.
that? And then a couple of angry emoticons. Like, really? Really, dude? Okay, block. And this was an American. That has nothing to do, of course. But
Yeah.
I was like, really? That is the only thing you want? Is just sitting in a bar and just talking shit about your country and drinking? Come on, man. Yeah, it is just. And I ask
Yeah,
any
that's
of
the
my old
only thing
friends.
a lot of us know how to do.
Yeah, I mean, and my old self would never have done that because it's like I always thought like these guys are cool and they drink and they're real men. It's all BS. They're not real men. They're
Yeah.
just losers. And yeah, and I misidentified friends for it was just this. I was looking for a social environment, and I thought these men were then the pinnacle or something, and then they weren't. They're losers. They just drink and complain about the world.
I think a lot of us
Yeah.
that quit drinking
Never seen a gym from
definitely
the
do
inside. I'm like, come
misidentify
on, man.
friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. It just that shift in your focus is just remarkable. I would have defended this kind of man 5 years ago tooth and nail, huh? Tooth and nail. Okay, this is a cool
Yeah.
bro. I hang out with him in the bar. What's cool about that? And these are mostly men. That is another thing. That is, I was like, why am I the youngest in this group? Like guys, like in their 60s and 70s, and I'm just talking shit. And I'm like, why? And some people already pointed it out to me. What is it with these people? And eventually, I started to realize these are not friends. It's nonsense. For when it comes to sobriety, it's technically not taking anything for granted. So what that means is one of the things that you read about people that have a long-standing sobriety is that they're gonna take things for granted. Like, oh yeah, no, I can have one, or oh, yeah, it has been years, and that's just nonsense. That doesn't work. So what I'm going to do, I keep on checking in. I will keep on holding myself accountable. One of the ways I do that now is building consistency in my good habits. Like that's why I invested in a home gym. I've decided to stay in Malaysia, where I created an environment where I can technically have that routine of healthy cooking, hanging out with people that don't drink. That's another thing. Just technically yeah, creating an environment of people that just have different interests that doesn't revolve around drinking. So that is one. Creating discipline, and that can only be done through consistency. It's not just because you sit on a chair and just one day you wake up like, now I'm going to be disciplined. That's not how it works. You just need to do the work every
Nope.
single day. Keep on reading, keep on growing myself, learning new skills, and that is in line also with my professional goals now. Is that after spending decades in education and in IT, I built experience and the skills, to technically do some freelancing in my own. In my own company is a big name, but just like a freelance stint and a YouTube
Yeah.
channel where I share my um, and the goal is not to get rich quick or whatever, like to have a million subscribers. No, none of that. Just consistency, just doing what I like to do and putting content out there and learning skills that I can utilize from my home. And I feel really good about that. And that's a slow process, but that's fine, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think it's funny that you mentioned get rich quick because social media is not a get rich quick scheme at all.
no,
And I've been reading this book, The Fast Lane to Millionaire something. Oh, The Millionaire Fast Lane by
yeah,
M.J. DeMarco. I
okay,
don't know.
yeah,
Uh,
yep,
so it's all about discipline and hard work. It's the process that makes, the progress.
yeah,
Like they look at me and you and they're like, "Oh, they're
exactly. Yeah,
sober."
there's
Man, they'd had it easy. No, like we had to actually work to it. Being
yeah,
rich.
exactly, and correct. And especially to your younger viewers, I want to say you always need to do the hard work. You just need to build consistency. You know,
Yeah,
the journey is the goal. You can change your life by setting goals, but the goals are not the actual goal. It's the habits you create along the way. And yeah, that
exactly.
is something that I'm not sitting here like a 50-year-old man, like being some kind of wise. No, because had to learn the hard way as well. Because if you would ask the 45-year-old myself, I would have said a very different thing. It's a
Yeah,
journey. It's a learning experience. Yeah, and
it is.
just enjoy the ride. That's another thing. Just it's amazing what maybe you could probably acknowledge that as well. Like once you get away from the whole scene of drinking and be just feeling like crap all the time, uh, not being getting sluggish and not feeling well, and
Yeah,
you get your energy back, and that allows for creativity to flourish. And then, that is the main takeaway, I guess, here for people. Yeah. And be kind to
yeah.
yourself. That is another thing. Be kind. You will mess
Be
up.
kind.
There will be things along your path, yeah, that if don't stop that inner critic. Like I read a book on what's called the Four Agreements. It's quite an interesting book. So about some Mexican traditional. I don't know exactly who wrote it, but I forgot the name. But he said like silence the inner judge. Everything what you do to move in the right direction is okay, even if you fall. It's just like
Yeah.
only quitting is losing, right? Yeah.
Yes, very true. So true.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I loved that. I mean, you have a lot of like very good detail. I do have one quick question. So you said you were married?
Yes. Yeah. I'm married
Does
to a Malaysian lady. Yeah.
a Malaysian lady? Does she drink
Yeah.
or is she?
No, she doesn't. No. So we I never had any. Yeah. That wasn't a factor at all. Yeah. This was
Okay.
for me solely an individual journey. First of all, because I just met her a few years ago, and this was already. I mean, technically, I've been dealing with this for like the last 30 years, mostly my
Yeah.
whole adult life. I also read a lot of people having issues with that, like when there's alcohol in the house. That's another thing, by the way, is that just don't have any alcohol in the house. That's a big
Yes.
one. Yeah.
I
Eventually,
don't
I had a few
how
alcohol. Yeah.
I don't know how to tell people enough to get it out of the house. The day that I decided that I was done drinking, I poured everything out. And I
Yeah.
have pictures, and I wish I would have taken a video, but this was before I did a
Yeah.
drinking video. But it
Yeah.
would have been epic to see all the bottles that I poured out. It was freeing. I
Yeah.
dumped everything out that I
That's
thought that
another.
I would drink.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and eventually you just realize that you have, and that's maybe also my luck, and maybe for you as well. Is like at least I didn't have a physical dependency on alcohol. That's probably also why I never
Yeah.
descended down into hard liquor or whatever. It was always beer. I was into the craft beer and IPAs and whatever, all that stuff. Uh, yeah, when people geek out about it, about the hop levels and whatever, and three different hops, four different hops, and it's just all it's marketing, right? It's just like, yeah, but you still sell poison. You can put a more nice label on it. It's just yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy for people that can moderate. That can. My mom likes a glass of wine once in a while. I have friends that just are moderate drinkers. I have one guy, one of my best friends. He is into craft beer brewing at home. Well, it's all fine. I can sit next to him and sip my soda water, and he can do his thing. That's fine. I'm not going to judge or say, okay, please don't drink around me. No, because that's on me. That's not on them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how you say moderation is not for everyone because I just had two podcasts earlier today and they both said the same thing. Like for some of us we
Yeah.
can't moderate. So all those people that attack us in our
No.
comments like, "Well, you could have one if you could just moderate." Oh, like all these
Yeah.
stupid comments. It's like, "Well, I don't drink because I can't moderate."
Yeah, yeah. That is. I think that is also the misconception a lot of people have. Once you find out and you find out the reasons why you drink, and there is an emotional attachment to it, especially related to. I mean, trauma is a
Yeah.
big word. I get that, and I don't like to use that word lightly. But there's something that makes you suppress your emotions. That is already enough to say
Hmm.
no, in my opinion. It's like
Yeah, I
because you
think
need to
I
feel
haven't
your
really
emotions.
talked
You need
to
to
very
go
many
through
people.
the. Yeah. Yeah, and trauma is usually like a very loaded word, right? It's something very heavy, but it can be as simple as not being able to process your emotions as a younger person. That is, uh, and people use terms like emotional neglect. Yeah, that sounds really heavy, but that can already include parents that don't talk, or parents that or people that don't teach you how to,
Hmm.
in a healthy way, talk about your emotions, or how are you feeling today, or positive reinforcement, any kind of positive feedback, and then you internalize everything, and then on top of that, alcohol, yeah, then it becomes part of your system, and then eventually you blow up, and you'll wonder like what
Yeah.
went wrong. Yeah, what went wrong?
That was
And why do
always
I
me.
still?
I would always just drink,
Yeah,
suppress, and then
yeah,
explode.
exactly. Yeah. And then you feel guilty, like why did it explode? These people didn't deserve that. What is wrong with me? Yeah, and then the inner critic, the inner judge
Yeah.
comes back. There's nothing wrong with you. That's the
Yeah.
problem. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
all
good.
and you know what it. Yeah, you know what it is, Megan. All these insights is not. This is when you just read and listen to podcasts and you try to just make sense of what is going on with your own life, your own dynamic, and that's
Yeah.
how you gain this. And
Yeah.
that is
That's how
also
you
the reason
heal.
why I was. Yeah, and not be too stubborn to accept help, first of all, to be accountable, to also to tell yourself, okay, this is not social drinking, this is not healthy. If you mix emotions with alcohol, that's not healthy. It doesn't matter what reason you have, it
Yeah.
just doesn't work. And it took me a few decades to
Right.
realize that.
For others who might be dealing with trauma and considering
Yeah,
sobriety, what advice would you give them?
yeah. Well, I would say two things. The first thing is, um, just look at your own behavior and your relation with alcohol in the past, and just be extremely honest with yourself, either in a journal in front of the mirror. If the behavior you show based on what alcohol triggered in you is problematic or not. And what do I define as problematic? Suppressing your own feelings, getting making a fool out of yourself in front of other people, feeling embarrassed, I don't know, drunk texting, any kind of behavior that's just not permissible, not permissible
Yeah.
by the standards of other people, but by your own integrity, by your own values.
Hmm.
And once you have identified that, then you need to just say, okay, I have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. What am I going to do about it? And my take on it would be, and this is a highly personal take, I get that, and this won't work for everybody, is dive into your preconditions that were set in your childhood. So do some inner child work. And that's not something heavy. That can be as simple as talking to a therapist and just explain your behavior as an adult and see the way you were raised. And you might find some, yeah, things that you weren't able to identify before, and that can be the start of the way out. That is what it was for me, and I understand that not everybody is, and that's also a disclaimer that I really want to make here, that this is not for everybody. There are people that are
Right.
physically addicted, and they have relapsed many times, and maybe those people should seek help from I don't know, the AA, or
Yeah.
I never.
Somebody a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of two people here talking about like, yeah, cold turkey switch. Yeah, that's important to
Exactly.
say, because otherwise the comment section will be flooded by like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Uh,
Yeah. I
this is a
know.
highly
I
personal testimony. This worked for me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Caught on to that
yeah.
real early in
So yeah,
my
those two.
videos.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see and hear about like how far you actually come and the progress that you make. I'm gonna dive into this whole inner child work because it sounds very,
Yeah.
very healing.